white paper governance of Atom 2.0. This has been a hotly debated topic in the community, and I'm very pleased to be joined by an all-star panel who will hopefully get to the bottom of these issues. We're going to get down and dirty, and we are going to debate Atom 2.0 here on the Interop today. So let's get it started.
Let's get ready to rumble!
All right, guys, thanks for joining me here for this very special episode of the Interop. Let's first get started and maybe get introductions from everybody here. And let's keep it civil, guys. Let's keep it civil. Friends here, we're all community members, and hopefully we get to the bottom of this and have a constructive conversation today about Atom 2.0. Starting from my left, Kevin.
Yeah, so I'm Kevin Garrison. I run only validator with the rest of the team and part of Juno core team, core root 2, and validator on the Cosmos Hub and a whole bunch of other chains, and part of the Cosmos community.
Tricky.
Hey there, Tricky from Cosmos Spaces, co-founder Cosmos Spaces. We do a bunch of content and community building throughout the Cosmos. We also run validators throughout the Cosmos, and I myself do some BD work for the Evmos team.
Thank you. And just to clarify here, so you guys will be speaking as Cosmos community members, not for the Cosmos community or on behalf of the community. Wanted to clarify that first.
Yes, thank you.
All of our opinions are our own.
That's right.
Exactly. And on my right, I have two of the people who helped author the Atom 2.0 white paper. Sam, please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Sam Hart. I have a long history with Cosmos. I was the first hire at Interchain GmbH. Worked on the funding program, did kind of grants, core team work scoping, done a whole bunch of work on the governance system in Cosmos. I was the Cosmos SDK governance product lead, still kind of am, and I'm the first author on the Atom 2.0 white paper. I've also worked pretty extensively with Udit on cleaning up the forum and just kind of like getting the soft governance like up and running.
Thank you. Udit.
Hi, everybody. My name is Udit. I'm from Hi-Fi Co-op, based in Toronto. Hi-Fi Co-op, one of the things we do is help run the Cosmos Hub's testnet program. And actually, just a quick note that there's an incentivized testnet coming up soon, and we're going to be helping manage that as well. On the white paper side of things, I'll help Sam author the governance section of the white paper. Also been involved in a lot of the soft governance aspects of the Cosmos Hub, including helping manage the forum for the Cosmos Hub.
Thank you. So I'd like to start this off by getting to like the bottom, like what is at the heart of this debate, and maybe to contextualize. So the Atom 2.0 white paper was announced at Cosmoverse about 2 weeks ago. It was announced as this revolutionary upgrade to the Cosmos Hub that would introduce a number of important and also very interesting new features and functionalities, but also novel tokenomics. I did an episode with Zaki Manian right after he did his talk, and you can find that here on the channel for more context. But yeah, let's maybe start by, at a high level, describing what are the important changes to Atom 2.0, and then perhaps we can get into the heart of the governance debate and all the issues that the community have been raising around Atom 2.0. I don't know if someone wants to take that maybe someone maybe from the white paper side, since yeah, we can start with either Sam or Rudy.
Yeah, I can just give some high level points on what the paper is trying to do. So there has been an upcoming, well, we've been working on two major upgrades to the Cosmos Hub for the better part of a year now. First is interchain security, and the second is liquid staking, and those are extremely powerful features, and they have some major kind of implications for the hub and the wider ecosystem. And the first of which is that the existing issuance model does not make any sense anymore in this liquid staking regime, because basically liquid staking allows or it will kind of incentivize stakers to issue these liquid staked assets and use those in DeFi, use those throughout the ecosystem. And then interchain security is this kind of like platform for building additional functionality around the hub. And so we kind of need to catalyze and more clearly define what those things that are going to be built around the hub look like. So it's kind of a, it's a canvas to work on. And in order for this to be successful, the white paper proposes a number of kind of additional changes. So the first is a change to the issuance policy. We move away from this existing kind of 2/3 stake ratio targeting, and we have the ability to basically move to a fixed issuance model. And then the other changes are basically the addition of this allocator module, which is a system for deploying capital and managing capital. And this is kind of to give interchain security and kind of the integrated economy around the hub a leg up. And then we have the scheduler module, which my personal favorite, and that is basically a way to monetize cross-chain, the IBC economy, effectively the cross-chain economy. And then the last kind of piece, which we're going to be discussing a bunch today, is governance system to effectively deploy that capital and just kind of like make sure that the hub stays in homeostasis.
Would anybody from the community side like to add anything here? Any observations or remarks on Sam's overview of the upgrades to the Cosmos Hub?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So that's a great breakdown, and I think it was interesting because I was at Cosmoverse. I saw kind of the grand unveiling, and it was awesome. But it was a very short window of time to actually go through kind of the actuality of the white paper. Up until that point, I think a lot of people hadn't had a chance to like really dive in and understand all the different aspects of it and how it all works. And I see a lot of people still trying to digest it. It's a very well written white paper, and I think it proposes like a lot of really interesting changes to Atom. But it is a shock. There's a big change there to what people are used to, and so naturally you have people going through those adjustment phases and trying to understand, okay, what would this actually look like? We're very used to this kind of 1.0 model that most chains have adopted of, some sorts of inflationary yield. And, I think when the hub was originally created, there was a different picture for it and a different role. And that's kind of persisted over time. This is the first time that we're really seeing a very different model being proposed that focuses a bit more on, real yields, and arguably the more difficult but probably correct way to expand and accrue value over time. That's kind of been the meme forever, is like, how is Atom going to accrue value? You have all these app chains that have a lot of utility, that have very specific problems that they tackle. And for a long time, the Cosmos Hub has not been the hub that it was supposed to be. And so we have this huge amount of capital that we need some way to take advantage of, right? So like Atom holders want to see number go up. They want to see more utility. And ICS was kind of the first thing that we saw that is like a promise of a brighter future. And we know that's early stages now, but even so, there, just as there was with IBC, there's going to be the adoption curve of that technology. And if that technology is to be successful, we need to find ways to drive its adoption, to make sure that it's adopted in ways that accrue value for Atom holders. And I think largely the debated parts within the community are, some of the finer points of the article, and maybe we didn't expect those points to be debated as hotly as they have been, but things like the treasury and allocations and what have you. So I think the biggest thing is that everybody, whether in the community or from wearing the hat of a validator, we just need to understand like what is the intended structure going forward, in the simplest possible terms, and how do Atom holders retain autonomy and control over the network and the allocations and these treasuries. How will those structures work? How will these elections occur? So those have been sort of the most hotly kind of contended points that I've seen just in some of the different chats that have popped up and what have you.
Thank you. Thank you for that summary on the community side. So let's talk about the issues at the heart of the debate here. So I've been spending the last 24 hours trying to read every forum post, every tweet, going through the Atom, the Cosmos Hub community forum and through Twitter, and like scrolling through this Telegram channel, which has thousands of messages, and trying to get at the heart of the issues that people have with this proposal. There was also an open letter that was written by a member or members of the community, which takes a pretty, I'd say, brutal approach at criticizing some parts of this paper. We'll link to all that here in the show notes. But from what I gather, it feels like the issuance model, and which is fairly closely tied to the treasury, seems to be the most hotly contested issue. I think people are generally okay with things like liquid staking, generally okay with the idea that we could have an MEV auctions on the hub, but it all comes down, I think, to how the issuance of Atom evolves moving forward, and then the other thing is how is the money that goes into the treasury spent moving forward in a way that is that best benefits Atom holders, but also protecting against misissuance of funds and things of that nature. Does everybody sort of agree that that is the main point of contention here, the most hotly point of debate here in this broad conversation?
I mean, I would say the treasury or the issuance, and then control of that resource is what I kind of perceive as the two main points that the community wants additional clarity on.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, I think one of the things I've noticed when people look at the issuance chart, people get happy, so excited, they think it's great overall. But where they get stuck at is where the issuance goes. I think the introduction of the treasury and the committee model, to some, there's not a lot of clarity. So they're making their own assumptions with the information they have. And I think it's making people feel a little uncomfortable, and they're just, wondering like, hey, why are we sending these funds somewhere else that seems like we're not in control of? So I think we kind of mentioned this before the talk, but maybe, Sam and Udi, you can go into how the committees are formed and how the atom holders still have control over these funds. And there's still accountability. There is like a system of checks and balances. Maybe it's not so clear in the paper when people first read it. But I think that we're like atom holders at the end of the day are still in control of all these funds. Just go ahead and ask the Juno whale. Governance is OP. We don't let anything slide by.
Yeah. I mean, I think the vision for this white paper is quite bold, and it is totally reasonable for token holders and community members to ask for checks and balances. I think there's a sketch of the governance model for Atom 2.0 that is provided in the white paper, but it's only a sketch, and the intent was always that the exact model that's going to be put into place is going to be collaboratively defined with the community. And that is actually what is written in the white paper. And there's also a request in the white paper for the community to come forward and draft a charter together where we can put the checks and balances in place together. And I've seen a number of community members pointing out requests that they have for the types of checks and balances that they want. And these are things that we can put in the charter together. The important thing in my mind is to strike a good balance between, giving the community sufficient checks over the council structure, but also not impeding the council's ability to work effectively and execute on day-to-day operations. And that's like really the crux of the matter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we all realize that there are people out there with knowledge and skills and expertise that should be in positions to make decisions that are best for us. If we get in a room with, all four of us, all five of us, when we were in high school, plus, Jack and Zaki, we're going to outvote them on anything we want. But are we smarter than them? Does that make it right? So I think that, we're removing some roadblocks of governance and some of that friction to empower some of these groups to make decisions that are going to be to the benefit of all holders. But maybe it's decisions that we wouldn't be able to come to in the correct amount of time if we had to go through a full-on governance process. So I think that these councils are actually going to be very beneficial to atom holders and put people with the proper skills and positions to help us grow and help us move the hub forward.
Yeah, I would add, actually, it's not just skills and expertise. It's actually also, in my opinion, attention and human relationships. Like, you want people to have focused attention on particular aspects, particular domains of the project. And if you see the business model outlined in the white paper, a lot of this actually depends on human relationship. It depends on people being able to bring in the right projects, allocate funding to the right projects to grow this sort of atom economic zone, right? And that can't be done without human relationships. And hub governance as a whole is like a large entity, right? You need individuals with real human kind of contact to do the business development work. So yeah, just in terms of framing, I think it's less about expertise and more about attention and relationships, in my opinion.
Maybe just if we could take a step back here and explain this concept of councils, because I've read this in the white paper, but also I think this is one of the things that maybe wasn't so clear about how this would function, and also like how these councils would be elected, how they how council members can rotate, and these sorts of things. Maybe someone take that.
Well, some of these details are definitely not described in the paper, and it's something that we wanted to discuss with the broader community. We've kind of like highlighted a couple elements that like we should have discussions about together. But let me just kind of start with like, well, what do we have today? Like, how do we get things done today? Well, there's kind of two systems in place. Like, one is this kind of development ecosystem largely funded by the ICF, at the moment. There's a bunch of core teams. There's work scoped largely motivated by the core teams, proposed by the core teams, and then kind of like the ICF is giving feedback, other core teams are giving feedback. The community does not have a lot of visibility into that right now. So like that's definitely a major problem, and it's something that we want to move more into the domain of the Cosmos Hub, like make that a transparent and like visible process. But there's already like an existing structure there. There's core teams, there's work streams, and there's kind of capital deployment that's happening behind the scenes. The other system is basically on-chain. There's a community pool, and very often there's like a community spend proposal for a specific, engineering project, business development project. The Prop 72 example is maybe the most recent. There's a multi-sig that gets funds, and then there's a set of kind of trusted stakeholders that are performing some kind of delegated operation. And basically, like both of these things are like, they're working, but they're kind of like less than ideal. Like the core development structure is like pretty opaque and complicated, and like, there isn't, it's hard to kind of like navigate. And the on-chain structure is, there's a lot of trust put into these entities, and then there's no way for the Cosmos Hub community to negotiate rates effectively. It's kind of just like one-off proposal, and then trust that somebody's going to do the work. So the purpose of the council system is basically to like try to solve both of those problems, like create a common framework, minimal, that brings those things together, allows the Cosmos community to kind of get some visibility into what's going on, make suggestions about what's going on. And these councils are really kind of generic entities. Like it is a project or kind of domain specific group. And then there's this assembly, which is literally just all the councils together, and the idea is that all the councils together can try to make some collective decisions about infrastructure development, capital deployment, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've seen discussed in the different forums and on Twitter is this idea that governance on its own probably is not a great funding mechanism. That and I've seen like Jay talk about this in the Cosmos forum, where essentially he says something akin to the fact that in order to deploy capital, like investors don't just trust some sort of a group of random people. They trust like general partners who have industry knowledge, who have connections, who have network, etc. And so I think that from that perspective, and certainly like as someone who invests in this space and is like raising a fund in the space, it makes a lot of sense to look at things that way. However, I think the risk there, specifically when spending funds that are where there is a significant stakeholder capture by like token holders, that there is this feeling perhaps that those decisions are made in dark rooms without the consent of the community. Funds may be misallocated, and so there's really this expectation of transparency and of I think community of involvement that is something that is like very, very much part of the crypto ethos. How do we strike a balance between these two models, right? Like on one side, the Cosmos Hub governance proposal model, where effectively there's no checks or balances on whether or not things are executed or any deliverables or anything like that on funds allocated, and the other extreme that is a committee of folks that are unelected and get to make decisions on how funds are spent. How do we strike the right balance here such that all the stakeholders are satisfied with the outcomes, if that's even possible, or at least get to some sort of place where most people are satisfied with the outcomes.
If I could just, I had a point on this, and I think Sam brought up something that's actually, I think an important one, which is just the way that like things have been done traditionally. Like the Cosmos community pool is not an effective funding source for anybody. Like if you look at even the Stargaze community pool, which is a much smaller chain, that's very specific app chain, has a larger community pool for funding than the Cosmos Hub. Most chains do. And we're not going to get very far with 1.1 million Atom to overhaul an ecosystem. So that's always been problematic, is the community pool for the hub is just way too small. The other thing is, even if it were larger, it's not a very effective funding method. So somebody just puts a proposal up on chain. The best method that can work out is it goes to a multi-sig, and then you're trusting that multi-sig to make sure that milestones are met, if they're even included. And ultimately, it's a bit of a popularity contest for funding. So how popular is the proposal? It's very easy to make something sound shiny and nice. But we do need people who have some expertise in project management, launching chains, and like really thorough vetting and due diligence to do that duty. The only other funding arm has been the ICF, and historically there's a large lack of trust in the ICF, and I'm just mentioning that as something that is true. That's I love Zucky. Ethan's fantastic. Like talking to them in person, I'm a big fan of them as people. But when I look at the ICF as an organization, it is very opaque. There are a lot of questions around transparency and effectiveness. And whether they're doing a good job or not is almost irrelevant, because people can't see it. There's not a visibility factor there. So I think, if people are having and taking issue with like transparency of funding and the ability to do so, that's been a long-standing problem in the Cosmos Hub. And that's kind of one of the things that I see this addressing, if it's well executed and it retains its ability to be controlled through governance. Because the important thing is, at the end of the day, you want Atom stakeholders to always have the ability to come in and say, hey, this isn't working for us, cancel order, eject, et cetera, et cetera. But we still need to be able to put things into the public view and do these funding endeavors in a transparent way with effective capital, because governance is not the most effective means of deploying capital.
Yeah, I just want to say I would definitely echo that statement around transparency in the ICF. So, as someone who's been like in Cosmos since before the token sale, and also I think in a fairly privileged position of being close to the Tendermint team quite early on, and like knowing a lot of the folks at the ICF. Like even I think that it's been like kind of hard to get access to that organization at various points where I've tried to, and so. I think that maybe some of the pushback on the paper, at least I feel that some of the pushback on the paper stems from that historical, like perceived lack of transparency. If we were in a parallel universe where the ICF was like a vastly more transparent organization, like say orders of magnitude more transparent, maybe reactions to this paper would have been different, and therefore, so Sam, maybe you can respond to this and like maybe give your thoughts on. And I know like Ethan has also talked about how the ICF is changing, is becoming more transparent. There's also an interview with Ethan here on the channel if those want to check that out. But yeah, Sam, what are your thoughts on ICF transparency and how it is playing out here in this debate?
Well, a lot of thoughts. And I definitely bear a little bit of responsibility as well. Like fully admit, I was doing a lot of the ICF like strategy and direction up until relatively recently. You know, there's two parts to this. Like, one is a kind of path dependency of like, how did we get here with the ICF? And the other is just like, what is the ICF at the end of the day? So the first thing is the primary development organization for the entire ecosystem, Tendermint, completely melted down. It is 100% dysfunctional. Like, it hasn't produced anything of value in the last 3 years, 4 years. Like, Ignite CLI is cool, but like the contributions have been like marginal, and like that was the entity that was supposed to build the Cosmos Hub, like deploy IBC, maintain the Tendermint consensus software. Like, that entity does not work, period. And as a result, the ICF was forced to like reconfigure itself to actually hold those functions, and it just like was not set up to do that. So like I said, I was the first hire after that Tendermint meltdown happened at Interchange GmbH. GmbH is fully owned subsidiary of the ICF. And the number one objective, the only objective, was ship IBC. Like, the whole project does not work if IBC is not there. Like, every ounce of focus is like, get IBC working, make sure that it's safe. And then the secondary objective was like, make sure that there's like that the network has value, like that there's some economic activity happening in the network, because otherwise the project is also just existentially, you know, doomed. So the kind of capacity that we had to do that with that was also severely limited. I mean, Jay was the president of the ICF for the first 2 years. Literally didn't return a phone call in that entire time. Like, we had to go through a whole bunch of red tape to figure out how to reconfigure the board. Just everything about the ICF's kind of organizational structure was like is just not set up for the kind of execution that you want around a exponentially growing ecosystem. And so this kind of brings us to the second point, which is like the overall structure of the ICF. The ICF is a Swiss Stiftung. It's a nonprofit organization that when they're doing the ICF does regular reporting, but it does regular reporting to the Swiss government. And that reporting is in German. Like the primary stakeholder that it's concerned about is like regulatory authorities, and the board and like the members of the ICF are now at a position where they're like a little bit more equipped to start dealing with things like the delegation policy and transparency, but like those things were just obviously super important, but they were always the second or third priority. There's always like one priority above for up until this point. So that's kind of like where we are today. And then going forward, the the ICF is just like not the entity that you want like leading the development of the Cosmos Hub. Like you want the Cosmos Hub to be leading the development of the Cosmos Hub. Like that's what we want at the end of the day. That's what everybody wants. And so the white paper is like trying to sketch a path to get there.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. I mean, yeah, of course, like I think the explosion or implosion of Tendermint certainly put a lot of pressure on the ICF and on those teams, and there was a whole lot of reorganization of like people, like human capital, to reallocate that human capital effectively in a new organization, the GmbH organization you mentioned at the time. Not to make this, I think we could probably do like a whole episode just on like what's going on with the ICF and the sort of history there. But I don't want to derail the conversation too much from the issue at hand here. One of the things that I think people have been really critical about here are like the checks and balances, and we've talked about these councils, we've talked about like governance and things of that nature. Udit, I wonder if you could maybe address some of the things that have been discussed in the community around how to properly have proper checks and balances on allocated funds once this proposal goes through.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe I can first start with just like outlining the general, like what's been proposed in the white paper so far. And there are obviously considerations that we're thinking about, but are not quite laid out yet. And these are things that we're looking for community input into. So the white paper proposes an assembly structure. The assembly is made up of a number of councils. Each council can delegate representatives that will represent that council in the assembly. One of the main kind of check that the community has over this council structure is a community council. So there is a council specifically outlined in the white paper for representatives of the community to have sort of day-to-day, the community's voice and be the community's like eyes and ears into the assembly structure, so they can have more sort of like day-to-day oversight over the councils. The other thing that the community has is the ability to develop this charter, which sets which encodes all the sort of checks and balances that we're talking about here. Ultimately, all assembly proposals are beholden to atom holder veto. So atom holders can always veto a proposal that's made to the assembly. Atom holders also have the ability to both onboard and offboard the councils. So every time there's a new council proposed, atom holders can decide if that council should be included within the assembly or not. And they also have the ability to offboard a council. The things that we kind of need to figure out is, we don't want a system where atom holders can where there's work being done, there's good work being done, and there's like there's a governance vote to offboard a council there, and there isn't quite enough sort of a graceful transition period to move that effort into another group of people who can take it over. So those are the types of things we're thinking about right now. Is like, how do we ensure this graceful transition between one council to another? How do we ensure that the people who are kind of doing the work have some amount of grace time to continue doing their work and transition off that work to somebody else? Other things we're thinking about are setting up eligibility criteria for membership into the councils. These are things that can be encoded into the charter. Disclosure of conflicts of interests. These are things that can be encoded in the charter as well. Yeah, that's kind of the way we're thinking about it.
Kevin, Tricky, would you like to respond from the community side? How are these councils been perceived from the community, and what are some of the sort of points of contention here about how this is being proposed, or ways this could potentially go wrong?
I think maybe this is just me. I get confused on it. Maybe just because of the terminology, and I could just be stupid, and that's totally fine. But I sort of look at it and I go like, I know at least the Juno way that we have things where it's like we have DAOs and we have sub DAOs, and there's the Juno network, which is like the parent DAO, which has ultimate control over everything. Underneath that, we have sub DAOs, which, like for Juno, this would be the Juno Growth Fund. So if we put something up and the Juno community doesn't like it, they have full like coded control over everything. So they could dissolve the DAO, they can cancel funding, they can change membership if somebody goes rogue, things like that. So I think the biggest thing that I've seen is just sort of a bit of a confusion over council, and maybe some of the community feels like, there's a kingmaker who's just going to come in and go, these 5 people are over, all of the allocations, and these 5 people are all over the business development, and good luck, and you've got to pass a horrible proposal to change anything. So maybe for me, it's just understanding like, okay, if I'm an Atom holder and I see, for the sake of argument, Sam, you're on a council, and you decide that you want to fund a project that is like the worst project that's ever been conceived of, and you want to spend $10 billion on it, right? It's your cousin's laundry service, and you think it's going to be great. And we all go, hey, you're out of your mind. We want you out. What is the recourse that an Atom holder has in a situation like that?
Yeah. There's a car alarm going off in my background, so I hope
it's not too bad.
Well, first of all, if Sam proposes this council, to begin with, Kevin, you as an Atom holder can vote for this council to not even be onboarded.
Okay.
To not even exist. And secondly, you can always vote as a council, as an Atom holder, to offboard this council, put a vote forward to offboard this council. The things that you cannot do are pick individual members of the council and say, hey, we want to fire this person. And that's mostly because we want to kind of limit the Atom holder's ability to kind of micromanage the day-to-day operations of the council. But council as a whole, you can offboard and onboard.
And can the council vote to remove a member? If like,
yes,
we
absolutely.
voted 11 people in, and the majority of them go, hey, this person's being ineffective in their position, or they just can no longer do the job, can they swap them out?
Absolutely, yes.
Cool.
Yeah, the couple additional details here. So agree the naming is maybe confusing at first. It was intentional. So with the next SDK upgrade of 046, natively in all Cosmos chains, you're going to be able to make DAOs, which is mind-blowing. I mean, it's going to change the game. Shout out to Gregory, who's in the audience here, who's been helping with this. And yeah, so any group of people is going to be able to spin up a DAO effectively, a group multi-sig. And so we need some way to distinguish between DAOs and some kind of explicitly delegated entity. Not because there's going to be a lot of DAOs, but these are going to be the ones that are like blessed by the Atom community, basically. Like, so the idea is that, okay, all of us are, we're going to spin up a DAO. We're maybe going to do like some public goods funding or something like that together. We think that there needs to be more Cosmos podcasts in the world, and we all contribute some funds to it. Well, we can go and do that autonomously. and maybe 6 months in, we're like, okay, like we're doing a good job. It would be great to get a little bit of Cosmos Hub support from this, treasury support from this, and so now we apply to get that kind of delegation from the council community. So we put up a governance proposal that's like, hey, this is what we've done as a DAO. We'd like to become a council, and this is kind of like the rate that we're thinking is what we're going to do with it. And that would be the onboarding process. Is like, okay, we're going to kind of formalize our relationship to the
Treasury
Atom
and assembly
community and the treasury specifically.
So in a way, they are DAOs, but it's like, you could say it's like, this is a special DAO. This is core to the structure of the Cosmos Hub. And that's really the biggest differentiator, is just like, we're making the differentiation through these names that this is core to the function of the hub, and it's like a hub entity.
Yeah, there's also a little bit of nuance here. So there is a council that already exists. It's this consensus council that's like working on Tendermint, right? There's a blog post about it recently, and this is this is something that we really want on the hub as a community. Like, we want to make sure that like this product, public good, is like available for the entire ecosystem, and this is not something that like the Cosmos Hub owns. Like these are people from all different organizations, like all different chains, but we want to like give them a home on the hub, and so that means that like they will maybe be accepting funds from other projects that like want specific features in Tendermint. And this is also one of the reasons that they need to self-manage. Like the hub can't just be like, hey, this other person from another chain, like you're no longer on the consensus council anymore. Like this needs to be an autonomous entity in order for that entity to feel kind of like safely housed on the hub.
So regarding this update, just side note here, when you say that there's going to be DAOs on the hub, are these just effectively just multi-sig addresses, or are they more elaborated?
Yeah, they're whatever people want. I mean, it's permissionless DAO.
I mean, this is already possible, right? I mean, we can already create multi-sig addresses at the layer 1, like with the SDK. It's just not very well implemented.
It just sucks doing it. Yeah. It's not fun.
If you've ever done it, it's almost it's a pro
I have done
feature.
it. Yeah, it is a pain in the ass.
So they should really make it 10 times easier, 100 times easier. And not only that, the kind of like level of integration with the objective. This is actually the product work that I've been doing for the last like 2 years. These like modules that you keep hearing about, interchain accounts, the changes to the Gov module that allow for arbitrary messaging groups, all of these actually, like Auth-Z, all these come together into like a composable system where you can just build kind of like whatever governance model you want. So like, and that's actually some of what's sketched in the paper, is like, hey, like we have all these facilities, like we can build like kind of higher order structure now, and be a little bit more kind of thoughtful with how we're self-governing the hub itself.
Okay. Just one question here before, because I realize we also want to talk about the allocator and the scheduler, and there's other things also I want to discuss. But with regards to these council formations, so these will be multi-sig, basically just multi-sig accounts that will have funds, and then there will be some sort of voting mechanism to allocate those funds. Can we talk about like the sort of Sybil resistance of these DAOs? Because like unless we have kind of like vetted addresses or KYC addresses where we know that like this address belongs to this person or this Twitter account or whatever, there are like Sybil attack. There's potential for Sybil attacks here, or for like some sort of social engineering attack where essentially someone claims to be like a group of people, but in fact they're just the same person. Can you address some of the issues here? I don't know if this has been talked about in the community, but it just feels to me like something that needs to be addressed either from like a social coordination perspective or from like a technical perspective, although I don't know that we have the technical frameworks to do this kind of like identity verification at a decentralized level.
Yeah. It's a super important question. I would say it's like both harder and simpler than you make it out to be. Like the like general Sybil resistance is obviously like incredibly hard, and doing it at scale is incredibly difficult. But we're not necessarily talking about a super scaled system. Like there might be 10 councils or tens of councils or something like this, and we have the ability to like do podcasts like this and like have community members, you know, have one-on-one interactions, and like there is they're real like human relationships that we're kind of talking about at the end of the day, and so I think that there's creating like the perfect automated system is going to be really challenging, and you know, maybe we should work towards additional automation, but I think it's totally fine for like a council, everybody to get up on a Twitter space or a podcast or whatever, and even if you're like a pseudo anon person, like you can still kind of speak about your positions and you know, talk about kind of your capabilities and visit, you know, just kind of like what you're trying to do, and I think that we are talking about a kind of human scale system that has a kind of like manageable degree of kind of human verification that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there is a certain amount of human verification, but I think there is still a risk. Like there is always a risk that like these things, like the system could be exploited somehow. Like, you know, it's not outside the realm of possibility to have like an entity or a person that would claim to be like a group of anon people, but in fact they're just like one person.
So actually, the community council that is proposed in the white paper should be actually tasked with doing some of this due diligence work and making recommendations to the community about whether a proposal for a new council is sufficiently vetted and feels like, you know, it is Sybil resistant enough, and so on. Those are the types of things that the community council can and should be doing.
Let's move on.
Please no.
Yeah, was that our endorsement, Kevin? Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I guess somebody wants us to run.
Someone in the comments is suggesting that Kevin should be president of the Hub 2024. So consider this the beginning of your campaign, Kevin.
Yeah, let's form a council to make sure that doesn't happen.
Let's move on here to the allocator and the scheduler. We haven't spent a whole lot of time on those. Yeah, should we start with the allocator, or is this like one topic that we just need to like batch together?
I mean, I think that work is a holistic system, in my opinion. Yeah, let me give a rundown. I mean, I guess let's start by saying it is cool that by and large, these are not issues that seem to be like contentious in the ecosystem. Like the things are just that we're talking about are like details, and like everybody's like, yeah, allocator, scheduler sounds great. Like, let's go.
Devil's in the details, man.
But like we've moved past this like the hub has no value mechanism, it has no purpose. Like we've jumped straight to like specific details into like how into implementation, which we should just acknowledge is, I think, a really good thing. But yeah, So scheduler, start there. We've been developing interchain security. Interchain security is an instrument. It is a technology for scaling a chain, adding additional functionality to a chain. It says nothing about what the functionality should be. And yeah, I'm of the personal opinion that interchain security is largely going to be commoditized. Like other chains are already talking about using interchain security, mesh security. Like these are all the interchain security is not like a moat that the hub has available. And so what the hub wants to do, what the hub should be doing, is trying to corner a scarce resource. And that resource, like the most valuable resource, is block space at a specified time. This is something that is incredibly important, particularly as the ecosystem scales. And it's also something that should scale with the kind of size of the IBC economy, which is that's like an incredibly powerful concept. So the scheduler is a kind of way for the Cosmos Hub to offer or kind of create a marketplace that is unforkable and in a non-coercive way, like offer value to the entire ecosystem, provide value back to that ecosystem, and at the same time profit. So I think there's a lot of super cool stuff that's going to be built on top of the scheduler. I mean, I'm like really excited about talking to teams about this. So anyway, like that, it's kind of a way for the interchain security product to have a moat and actually like do this kind of in line with like the philosophy of the hub, like this non-coercive, like sovereign interoperability mentality. That's one. The allocator is a way for, you know, the world that we're moving into that's kind of implied by interchain security already is that there are going to be multiple sovereign entities that are interacting with each other, right? And so there needs to be like some mechanism of like gluing these things together, creating multi-party relationships. And that is what the allocator is intended to do. You're able to create a incentive compatible kind of multi-chain contract with that allows for things like a token swap, a kind of long-term service agreement, and basically a way for the hub to kind of like economically connect to these peripheral entities. So interchain secured zones is like the kind of obvious first cohort that should be addressed. But it could really be anyone, any entity that's kind of IBC connected.
What on the community side? What have been some of the points of contention here with the allocator and scheduler modules? I haven't seen very many sort of big issues being raised, but maybe I'm just missing those. Tricky, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I think going through some of the comments, one of the the only real concern is whether MEV is good. Some people are still against MEV, but I think also some people kind of brought up a little bit of a good point of like maybe what's up, Soy? Maybe putting the allocator and the scheduler through some sort of like a test run or test net. Like ensuring that it does work as intended, and especially in the long run. It would, be unfortunate to use the allocator and the scheduler and start deploying all of this capital in these funds and to find out that maybe there's something wrong with it. And I think that's maybe some of the only concerns I've seen. I think for the most part, people are actually pretty excited about this because I think, when you break it down, like, the the allocator seems like token swaps with like an ohm fork, on steroids. It's really cool, the way that can happen. And then I think with the scheduler, with MEV and block space, like I think everybody, like Sammy explained, like block space at any given point in time is going to be very valuable. And so like one of the questions I had, so like you said, it can serve the wider IBC ecosystem. So can like Juno, Osmosis, Evmos, can they come to the hub and be a part of the scheduler and offer block space that anybody can settle on, or do you have to settle on the hub or said chain that you were secured by?
Yeah, I guess I'll address that last point first. So yes, any of those chains could participate in this marketplace, but they also don't have to. 100% optional. Like that's the way that the hub is going to operate. Moving forward, like there's no coercion. You do not need to use this thing, but if it provides value, like please, like enter into this kind of shared marketplace. I think that there's super cool stuff that you can do with it. Like you can do timed IBC interactions with each other. So like at this specific moment, we want things to trigger at the same time. So kind of like alarm clock, cross-chain interactions. And then of course you can, there's a whole bunch of kind of financial, applications that could be built on top, as well as things that improve privacy and improve or actually minimize MEV at the end of the day. So one of the projects that was announced at Cosmoverse was a collaboration with Fairblocks. Fairblocks is going to use interchain security, and this is basically like a transaction encryption service, which should reduce MEV. And you can combine this with scheduler. So like not only not only can you schedule these cross-chain transactions, but you could make sure that they're encrypted and like actually providing customers with best execution and the kind of like most minimally extractive order routing. Should I go into your other question, or I feel like I've been talking for a little while? Okay, you're talking about the allocator. So, and I think the main point was about the degree of commitment that we want to make to this. So both of these systems can and really should be built on interchain secured zones. At least the kind of core logic should. And I think they're really we can kind of like modulate the hub and the treasury's like interaction with them. So I definitely see this being pilots and trials and kind of like if those are working, kind of increase the available resources.
That was sort of the biggest point that I've seen, and also what I've chatted most about with like Zaki and everyone, and talked about in these chats. There's people who are obviously a lot more conservative and there's always going to be people who are just like, this is a terrible idea, burn it. But there's, I would say, a great number of people who very reasonably want to see this system implemented, but have uncertainties and doubts because of unknown variables, things that we just can't determine right now. So, Zaki's mentioned that he's in favor of like a slower rollout and smaller allocations in the beginning, and being a little bit more conservative at the outset to like create a proof of concept, which I definitely agree with. I think that it needs to be enough that like we can actually see if this will be effective with larger amounts. Like it can't be, here's $1 million, go, create interchain security ecosystems that are beautiful. Like, it's just not going to happen. But, at the same time, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, and, tail issuance and all these things going towards a single treasury. Like, people go like, oh, that's a lot all at once. So I think it would actually help a lot in getting this pass-through governance to go, hey, this is the long-term goal, but here's our first milestone with this paper, and this is how we want to prove this proof of concept to the community to make everybody feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I feel that this is something that was missed in the paper, and the rollout details. And I feel like a lot of the concerns and maybe the pushback on the paper would have been significantly reduced had there been a more long-term nuanced approach to rollout that have been detailed in the paper. I echo the sentiment of the open letter author. Also, my co-founder over at Epicenter, Brian Crane, tweeted that the rollout should be seen as a progressive rollout, and that we should vote on things piece by piece rather than a single big upgrade. And so yeah, I feel like this is something that needs to be maybe like someone needs to basically like have a roadmap and say, here are the goals, like here's the long-term goal, here's where we're going to try to hit. But like any plan, plans can always change depending on immediate variables. So if like one thing gets rolled out that doesn't really work, or like actually doesn't end up like fulfilling its goals, then we need to reevaluate. And so yeah, I feel like this is really important for the long-term success of this project.
Yeah, totally hear that. My kind of initial response, like there's a bit of a rhetorical thing, like the white paper, a good white paper, like needs to bring the vision. It's about the vision, and inevitably there's going to be details that are changed. If you look back into the Bitcoin white paper, like there are things that are not implemented in Bitcoin. And that was the number one thing that the hub was missing, is the vision. And so the objective was to bring a holistic vision that fits together as a whole. And so this is why I'm against breaking up the white paper itself into separate sections. However, the implementation absolutely will be broken up into sections, like no question. This is going to be a multi-year rollout. And at every step of the way, the community is going to have the ability to say, no, this is not what we're looking for here. But the paper proposal is a signaling proposal. All it's doing is saying, this is the new North Star that we're looking, that we can kind of agree on. And we're going to work together to kind of figure out details and make adjustments together. I can say what I have, a good degree of confidence would happen if the white paper proposal is approved in the first year or so. Would that be helpful? So kind of as I mentioned at the very beginning, interchain security, liquid staking, already in flight, right? Like interchain security is supposed to go online. I mean, it's in testnets now. It's supposed to go online Q1. And there are going to be a number of liquid staking providers that are going to come online as interchain security is launched. I mean, Stride is already online, but there's a kind of host of others that that are going to be important players, and the first step is to just kind of like watch that happen and observe and like kind of make sure that that's all being executed safely. In the meantime, the community should be, well, we can kind of do a lot of planning, and the community should be kind of working on a charter. We're already working on one, and we want to kind of invite feedback on that relatively soon. So there's kind of these soft governance processes that can unfold simultaneously. And then once we see a degree of adoption with liquid staking and we feel like it's safe, at that point, we kind of, there's a window to change the issuance policy. So the issuance and this kind of proto assembly, council and assembly structure would be the first step. And we absolutely want like checks and balances on that, like restrictions. We want to make sure that that's kind of paced in a way that the community is comfortable with. And then kind of having done that safely, we can think about the deployment of these, the scheduler and the allocator as kind of secondary processes.
Yeah, I hear that. I don't know if the comparison to Bitcoin is a correct one. When the Bitcoin white paper was released, there were a handful of people reading this, and the implementation was done in very close quarters. Whereas here we're talking about a community of like tens of thousands of people, and value that has already accrued to those token holders who have invested in this project, like emotionally, but also financially and with their sort of time and sweat. I think that I just feel that there's an alternate universe in which the rollout plan, or this kind of idea that this would be rolled out over some time, could have been more effectively communicated, or there could be more transparency around what the ambition there was, such as the concerns of people around like some sort of I don't want to say like takeover, but like some sort of forced implementation of this. Effectively, I think like people who have concerns here feel that this was kind of decided, and that there's not a whole lot of like discussion to be had any longer, even though it's happening. Like that is, I think, like some of the perception around this. Hence this conversation. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe on the community side, we can just get reaction to this, and then I do want to. There's one last thing we want to talk about, which is issuance.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tricky.
I'll just say, Sam, I think it's important to realize kind of what you pointed out, that like this initial, white paper is just a signaling text prop. It's not like we're committing to all these changes to be hard coded in right away. And it's going to be like a phased rollout plan where, like you said, each time we have an upgrade with a vote for each phase, the community has a chance to say, hey, we don't think this is working. Maybe it's time we reassess and stop. So I don't think that this is kind of like everything's already decided and there's nothing we can do type thing. I think, like Sam pointed out, like it's the goal of the paper was to give the complete vision, and then from there, it gives us some direction and some guidance to start pushing forward. So I hope people don't think it's kind of like, hey, this is it and we're done and see it, sayonara, like things are happening. No, like we're gonna have the checkpoints in at each time to hold people accountable and also make changes when we need to and be flexible.
Yeah, I feel like Zaki's talk at Cosmoverse could have just had like this big signaling proposal draft watermark kind of like spread across the thing, and then the paper itself could also have like a watermark that says like idea draft signaling proposal up for community discussion.
100%.
Like
I will be the first to admit, like we didn't roll it out perfectly. There's like stuff that it definitely could have been executed more effectively. I also like will freely admit, like I was held up writing the paper and I was like, okay, you all like whatever, make some slides, like like other there's like other entities that were thinking about like presentation and how this is going to go. So yeah, mistakes were made, but
Yeah.
importantly, like we're not talking about the hub having no value anymore. Like
Yeah.
like
Which is great. Like that's a great thing to come of this. I think, you know, people have been screaming about atom value accrual for a long time, myself included. And, you know, it's long felt like truthfully, every chain but the Cosmos Hub was doing something. And you know, it's like, oh, is it going to be base money? No. Is it going to be a hub? No. Okay, so then what is it? You know, and now we have like a vision of something that it could be that looks like it will work, and that we have a chance to like actually grow with, not just for the hub but the entire ecosystem, because it lets us interface with new chains like the USDC chain. That's a huge deal. Like it's a huge deal. And that's kind of like an early win. Yeah. I do want to just say one thing, and I know Seb, you want to move on to the next thing, but just on the point of governance is when this does hit on chain, I do think it's really important, like just as validators who are voting on this and listening to the community, it needs to be included in that signaling proposal that this is the broader vision and North Star, that things can change and that the implementation is negotiable over time, but that we have like a guiding concept and an understanding that like this is okay to change. You know, it will be rolled out gradually. And I just think doing that in like plain, uncomplicated English so that like every atom holder, you know, at any level can understand it really easily is going to be super, super important to making it passable. So that's like my one like worry, I guess. It's just sometimes with like the white paper is very technical, which is great because it like gets into a lot of the nuance, but like just having a very, very like nice breakdown with like a basic roadmap and an understanding that this is a rollout that can change along the way will help a lot.
Yeah, I think that's right.
We definitely had some documents like this when we started, and when I showed some initial things, they're like, you know, the feedback I got was like, whoa, this is like cart before the horse here. Like, you know, we're thinking about rollout plan. Like, we're not even getting like, let's get on board with the vision. So
yeah,
it's important to think that, like, you can't please everybody, I guess.
No, totally. And we're at the phase now where we like see what the great idea is, and now we are talking about like, okay, well, what's the cart, you know, and what is the horse, and where is it going, and all of that. So I think it's good that we're having these discussions and getting to these points. And I also want to just like thank you guys for engaging in it and being a part of the process, talking to the community. Like that Telegram chat is wild. And
yeah, hard to keep up.
But it's good that it's happening.
I would, you know, give a small nudge to like, please use the forum. Like,
totally.
If you look, I don't know how many. I know Seb, you're around for this, but like, if you look at like the decision making that came about, or that kind of led to the Gravity DEX being on the hub, almost all of that was in Telegram, and I don't think half of people could even find that at this point. Like, and I think a lot of people agree that like maybe wasn't the best strategic decision. So like, how are we as a community going to reflect on our decision-making capability and like learn from these things if we literally can't even go back and see what we were doing? So the forum is super, super important, and let's please make sure that like, you know, important details are captured there so that we can go back and look at it.
Yeah.
I think
I agree that's serving
true,
as like a filter. It's like, here's a bunch of really crappy ideas. Here's a bunch of pretty good ones. Here's a couple great ones. And it's like, great, let's filter that to the forum so that we have, you know, an actual record of things. We have that archival resource, and everyone can kind of have a standard communication hub around governance, I think is obviously important.
Some of the conversations in that Telegram channel have actually been pretty productive and very interesting. And I think if there's anybody in this who's listening, who's part of that Telegram channel, you do a great service to everybody by just like going through that Telegram channel, pulling out those important bits and moving them into a comment in the forum. I think that would be super valuable. There's a discussion that's been started around the charter in particular. If there are specific things that people want to request to be included in the charter, I think that's a great venue to place those suggestions in the forum.
But there,
So here's the
the thing that I think is a little bit unfortunate is like there's now a proposal on the hub, this this kind of like counter proposal document, and I feel like that was very that was kind of discussed in the Telegram, and maybe like the Telegram was used as a placeholder for the forum, and now there's no post on the forum, there's no like discussion available for that document on the forum. So it's like that's the thing I want to avoid is like, now we're not talking to each other anymore. Like we've separated these spaces, and that's not how you have like a dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that document's pretty unhinged. It makes a couple good points in there. It's also like a lot of it's pretty wild. We issued a no with veto vote on it because it's like we're trying to kill something that isn't even on chain yet, and there's just a lot of I don't know, it's spammy, and it's just not this is not the way that governance should be done. So like for me, as on the other side of this, like if we go fully to the other end of the spectrum, like this is also not okay to do things like this, where you're coming in and trying to kill an ongoing discussion that is being had between a bunch of the core team and the surrounding entities around the hub and the community before anything can actually be discussed, worked out, and adjusted. So, and fortunately, that's like very much the leading vote. It seems to be consensus that that's like not a cool way to do things. So I hope we can avoid that in the future.
Yeah, I think this is like probably one of the core issues with governance is like, what is the proper forum? And I feel like the forum is wherever people want to have those discussions. And so it's unfortunate that, some people want to have those discussions on Telegram because that's how they want to, like that is the forum where they feel most comfortable to have conversations. And then some people are more comfortable in like having like long form thoughts and like formulating long form thoughts into a forum post. And I mean, like then it's down to like Udit said, right? It's down to community leaders and community sort of like managers to sift through that stuff and then extract the nuggets and make it into a more like archival form. I don't know that we're going to come to consensus around what is the right place to be having these conversations. They're going to happen wherever people are having them. Like if I'm having a conversation in my backyard about this stuff and like we come to some realization, like it's too bad it didn't happen on the forum, but that's just where the conversation happens to have happened. We're running pretty long here. I think we're going to try to go to an hour and a half if you guys are all up for it, but I do want to talk about the issuance. That has been one big point of concern, and certainly a point of concern of this counter proposal. Lots of folks also on the forums and on Twitter have been talking about the issuance, claiming that it dilutes atom holders, that the atom holder is effectively paying a tax. Some have also, suggested that the ICF should, and certainly people in this chat have been talking about this as well, that the ICF should front some of the financing here because the ICF is sitting on a significant amount of money. Maybe starting on the community side for this one, can you summarize a little bit of the conversation around the issuance, and what are the main points of concern?
Yeah, I mean, people hate taxes. I mean, that's so anytime anyone says that, it's like it sends up the flags, and people don't like being diluted either. Though I'm not convinced that this is like effectively dilution. I mean, to some extent, absolutely. Like there is an element of that. You can't deny that. Like putting a large amount of tokens into a treasury, which were not previously there and have to be kind of created. There is a form of dilution there, but the real question is, I mean, inflation is kind of dilutionary too, right? Like the people who have more are going to receive more inflation than those who have less. So it's like, yeah, we could look at this in a number of different ways. The question is really, where do we want to put those resources? And I think that there's a balance between like what is the right thing, which is putting funding towards building, while also keeping enough inflationary rewards there to like keep people happy on a gradual scale. So it's like, I see the tail issuance thing. If that's like a sticking point, like just ditch it. It's not a big enough thing to like stick up an entire project on and an entire overhaul. So I think it's like, if we're going to look at, okay, if the community really, really wants this and it's not super, super important to this, like maybe we just go, great, that's something that we're willing to give up. And we recognize that's really important to people, and, c'est la vie.
Tricky, Sam, Udit, any response?
Tricky, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think you ask yourself, like, is the main issue with these Atom tokens being, minted, that they're going to a treasury and not necessarily the community pool? I think it's, the end game, I think is pretty good. At the end of the day, we don't want there to be much inflation on Atom, and we can use all these other interchain secured zones that are, having a coin that's minted and inflated to, supplement that. And at the end of the day, if the treasury is doing its job right, the interchain secured zones that are giving us these tokens won't be, quote unquote, shit coins. They will be valuable tokens that will still hold value, that whether you want to sell them or keep them and continue to, build up your portfolio. I don't think that it's going to be as bad as some people think it's going to be. I think that they're just, used to their APR they're getting on Atom, and it's a safe investment to, stake and just, get yield. But I think this just kind of turns that up on its head, where we're not, worried about inflating our coin to 1 million. We're gonna use inflation to fund a war chest to really make it worth the Atom holders' time to stake, to be a part of the Cosmos community, and invest in these consumer chains. So I think that there's some negotiation to be had. I think that, like these numbers that were put out there are put out there for a reason, but they're not set in stone. I think that people just have to come with a cohesive argument and reasons why, and we can make that happen. But one thing I did want to point out about that prop that they put up, you can definitely confirm that Atom holders are undercover Bitcoin maxis, because it says read it all or stay poor. So that was at least one funny part about that proposal.
Cool. Well, I'll respond. So there's one kind of point about the treasury and like the mental model around the treasury that I think is pretty important, that I've been trying to promote, but maybe isn't like fully socialized. And that's that, like, the tokens that are in the treasury are like, that is not part of the float. Like, that's not part of the tokens that are available for public trading. Like, so that's not going to have the same price impact as just dumping them onto the market. And not only that, but these are tokens that are in control of the Cosmos community and ultimately of the Atom holders. So Atom holders can veto anything that the treasury is doing. And so that means that they could just hold on to them, indefinitely, if the Cosmos Hub chooses to do so. The treasury is like at these discretionary resources that can be deployed by the Cosmos Hub community. It's important to have a substantial treasury for a number of reasons. One is that, it's, and there's definitely a symbolic element that's, I think, not unimportant. But there's also just, there's ways to use the treasury that don't even dilute atom holders at the end of the day. So you can borrow against it, use it as collateral, and it's really just resources available for deployment, and that also means available for non-deployment. So it is pretty different than issuance and immediate sale. That's not kind of what's happening here. One of the other reasons that this is important is the issuance model change. So we're radically reducing issuance, and that means that the community pool is not going to be receiving the same kind of level of atom rewards from issuance. And so we kind of need to think about the resources required at the beginning to achieve this project that we're endeavoring on together. And so basically, like, the purpose is to jumpstart this economic loop. We want Atom to be the currency. In order for Atom to be the preferred reserve currency, you need Atom, to kind of integrate into the larger ecosystem. And we want to do that in a way that's always, high ROI for the Cosmos Hub, and do it in the kind of most precise and strategic way possible. And so that's where the allocator comes in. I guess one last point. I've definitely been trying to collect and understand all the kind of community feedback, community views. Been talking to Zaki and a bunch of the other paper authors. We hear the community, and I think we're gonna try to make some adjustments that really that kind of address the key questions. The tail issuance, for instance, it was always kind of the intention that the treasury can deploy resources as it sees fit, and so directing those resources back to the distribution module, stakers and validators, always on the table. But we're going to make that a little bit more explicit. That could be a parameter in the system where Atom holders can choose to direct the tail issuance. I think that's totally fair, and kind of spelling that out more explicitly, I think satisfies a lot of people's concerns. And then we're also talking about a kind of staged checkpoint tranching system that gives Atom holders kind of additional confidence, and just doesn't maybe do it all in one go, but allows some additional checks to be put in place for the community to kind of see that things are going the way that they expect.
Udi, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, one final point just to add to what Sam was saying and responding to a point that Tricky made about the community pool. I think this was mentioned earlier. Why isn't these tokens going into the community pool? I think the best way to understand it is to look at kind of what happened in Prop 72, where these tokens were allocated to a multi-sig to go and conduct business development efforts on behalf of the hub. In the future, we imagine more of these efforts being required, and particularly when these allocator DAOs come live. And the idea with the council system is really to make this type of effort become more accountable and transparent to atom holders as a whole. So, in fact, if the intent of moving into the community pool is to give more oversight, that is actually what is being done by the council system. It's making creating a system where we can more efficiently deploy capital to these smaller groups, but also have the oversight and checks and balances from atom holders.
Very good. Well, I think we're coming to some sort of resolution here. This wasn't the fight I was expecting it to be, but that's good. We're all friends here.
Sorry to disappoint.
No, I was actually like following the discussion and in the Telegram group, and it seems that people in the Telegram group are also watching this, and pleasantly surprised that this has been a constructive conversation. Good. And I'm also pleasantly surprised now. Of course, I knew we weren't going to be throwing gloves at each other. But yeah, maybe some of the points here, maybe just to kind of summarize. One thing that I've taken away from this, and that I hope people have also taken away from this, is that this is a signaling proposal. The white paper, as it was written, and also the forum posts and all of the conversations, were meant to, really spark a conversation and basically do what we're doing now. And although that maybe that wasn't so obvious to everyone, it certainly wasn't obvious to me. That is in fact the case, and all these discussions are actually helpful in moving things forward and arriving at a new design for the Cosmos Hub that aligns the community, aligns stakeholders, aligns token holders and developers, and also the ICF. So that for me is like a big takeaway here. Kevin, Tricky, Udit, Sam, what are your main takeaways? Maybe starting from my left, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I am just happier to hear is more like on the community control side of things. I think generally speaking, I do believe that smaller groups of professionals are like a more efficient machine for this kind of activity, because they can actually go out, make the contacts. Like, I work on business development for Juno. Like, we have a very small like group of people, about 9 of us or 10 of us, who go out and like do the legwork to create these relationships and get applications building. I think the same thing needs to exist for the hub. The biggest thing is just that we wanted to know that the community retains control over the councils and the funding, and that they always have veto power every step along the way, because it's great to have freedom. We just want to be able to hit the abort button if something goes haywire. And that's what gives like me confidence to go, okay, good. I know that the people who are staking with us are going to be happy, because they can vote and still have a say, at least in how the machine which is working functions. So I think that's really important, that atom holders can veto the treasury. And, probably the other point is just that I see this as putting more control in the hands of atom holders now, and honestly less power into the hands of the ICF, which I think is a good thing. The ICF does need to work on its transparency. I know that they're actively working towards that. And, I think we'd all like to see that happening faster. But the delegation policy and things like that, that's great. And I want to see more changes on that. But I think this is a great way to like take a lot of that stuff that was opaque and not visible to voters and stakers and put it more into the public eye, and now give veto power. Like, before, we could never veto the ICF. Like, it just was there, like, unless you went through some sort of crazy fork or something. So now we have like potentially a mechanism to determine and have power over the people who are making these decisions, and veto along the way, which I think is always a good check and balance.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Atom, it's crazy. We now have a vision for Atom that leads to value accrual, and the whole Atom holders are still in control every step of the way. I think it's great that we have something to argue over for what's our next step forward, rather than wondering, what is our next step forward. And I think I just want to say, if don't be paralyzed by fear or uncertainty around this prop. If you don't understand it, get in the forums, ask questions, read other comments. I think that once you start to understand this more, you'll realize that there's a lot that you're going to agree with. That's really cool, and there's a lot of opportunity. But maybe there's a few things that you'd like to see changed or talk more about. And I think it's obvious, and it's been expressed here that that's a possibility. Not everything's set in stone. So not only do we have this great opportunity in front of us, but we also have an opportunity to shape it together as a community to make sure it's something we all can get behind and support. So yeah, I'm just excited for the next steps for Atom, and to see what comes out of the next version of the paper once we take some feedback from the community as well.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty bold vision for Atom, and what gives me the most hope is actually to see like the extreme, like vibrant discussion that's going on around this white paper. And I think one of the things that is extremely important for the success of what's being proposed here is robust governance. And the fact that we are seeing this much deliberation happening about the white paper gives me a lot of hope that we will be able to put into place the type of governance system and the types of checks and balances we need for the successful delivery and execution of this project. So yeah, that's my main takeaway.
Totally. And if you zoom out at the kind of primary critiques that the community is having about the paper, issuance and control, those are actually the level of discussion that I think the community should be having, like fiscal responsibility, like this is, how are we thinking about spending at the highest level? Control, like who are the actors doing this? Like, how is this structured? Like, these are precisely the things that the community like should be focused on. And so like that also makes me really happy that like we're working at the right level now. And the paper also suggests, that there should be more kind of avenues for input and constructive discussion that the community has to really help build this thing. And so I'm super excited to see this community council form. At there's so many super articulate and well-informed people that are like contributing to this conversation, and I'm ecstatic to kind of invite them in to collaborate on this.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm also very very bullish on this whole thing generally. I think I think we are heading towards a new era for Cosmos. I've said before that I think that there are like epochs of the Cosmos and Atom ecosystem, and certainly pre-IBC was one epoch, and there's been some amount of innovation happening since IBC was launched, and we've seen sort of a Cambrian explosion of applications and innovations at the layer 1 level, but also the smart contract level with COSM, WASM, and things of this nature. And I think that now with the hub becoming a real force for building ecosystem, like very important infrastructure for the ecosystem, and that's secured by the Cosmos hub, I think is just like a net win for everyone. And I'm also very bullish and excited to see other chains in the interchain ecosystem have different approaches to this. So, Osmosis certainly has a different approach. And for those of you watching, Sunny will be here on the podcast on a live stream on Thursday. So subscribe to get notified where that comes out. But yeah, we'll be talking about the osmosis approach and how it's different from the Cosmos Hub approach. But I think that all of these things sort of lifts all boats, right? Like all these experiments are rising the tide for the interchain, and giving a sort of raising the profile of IBC, the Cosmos SDK, and the Cosmos technology stack as a whole, which is I think the stack that we all agree is very well positioned to dominate a lot of the blockchain ecosystem in the coming years. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here. We've gone a little long, but I think everybody here in the live stream greatly appreciates you being a part of this conversation, and look forward to continuing the conversation on Twitter and wherever we find you. Please consider subscribing to the Interop to get notified of new episodes every week. We typically do podcasts, live streams on Thursdays. This was a special episode, but we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming on Thursday. Also, be sure to check out Epicenter, my other podcast, where we'll be interviewing Zeki and Ethan tomorrow. So if you look up Epicenter podcast on YouTube, please subscribe there, and we'll have an episode with Zeki and Ethan where we dive into the vision for Atom 2.0. That's tomorrow. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing you again very soon.